Whether thou art a ghost that hath come from the earth, or a phantom of night that hath no home, or one that lieth dead in the desert, or a ghost unburied, or a demon, or a ghoul, whatever thou be until thou art removed, thou shalt find here no water to drink. Thou shalt not stretch forth thy hand to our own. Into our house enter thou not. Through our fence break through thou not. We are protected, though we may be frightened. Our life you may not steal, though we may be scared to death.
Welcome to Scared to Death, Creeps, Peepers, Roberts, and Annabelles. I'm Dan.
Hello, Dan. I'm Lynze.
Hello, Lindsay.
Hello, sir.
We have a very fun free merch and live show announcement today before we get into our stories.
Yes. So first, I am going to talk about our upcoming live show. We are so excited to do this again this October. We'll be doing a global live stream. And this year, we're going to be doing it from New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not entirely sure what that looks like at the moment. But yeah, we had plans to meet friends down there. And then this came up and we're like, well, let's just do it there. So super excited about that. And just like in years past, you'll be able to watch the show in real time and then access it again later. And we'll give you all the details next week. But this week, we just wanted to share that. And then we wanted to move on to the street team.
Mm-hmm.
So just mark your calendars for the live show, which is October 24th. And then tune in next week. We'll give you all the info on how to get tickets and the whole shebang. And now Dan is going to share about this year's street team.
Yes, it is time for our 7th annual Bad Magic Street Team.
Wild.
Yeah, just like with previous years, a fun picture of a Bad Magic sticker slapped somewhere interesting will win one lucky person a $200 Bad Magic merch credit. As usual, there will be 500 free sticker packs, 10 stickers each. In each pack, you only pay for shipping, and it's first come, first serve. Once they are gone, they're gone. Please limit yourself to one sticker pack so more people can join in on the fun. Once you receive your stickers, all you have to do is slap them all over the place, take a picture of where you put them, post that picture on Instagram and or Facebook using the hashtag BadMagicStreetTeam, and then just tag us. And that's it. The goal is just to have fun, and hopefully we get some new listeners, but honestly, mostly fun. We just love seeing our stickers out in the wild. Let's grow this amazing Bad Magic community one sticker at a time. In addition to the normal 500 sticker packs, this year we also have a limited edition merch that you can wear as you rep the greatest podcast in the universe, hopefully, or maybe your top 10. You can choose from Bad Magic Street Team branded merch and Time Suck and Scared to Death specific Street Team gear, tees, hoodies, water bottles, and more. On September 2nd at noon Pacific time, we will drop the Street Team merch for you to browse and purchase ahead of time. Then on September 16th at noon Pacific time, the sticker packs go live. Set your alarms. Once they're gone, they're gone. And for our Annabelles, check out the new Cold Sore Cassie doll tee from episode 251. With the tube of Carmex, this gal will conquer the world just with slightly shiny cold sores.
Fair enough. And be careful where you slap those stickers, you guys. Be respectful. We are not liable for you putting them places that you shouldn't.
And we'll announce the winner in November. I don't have the date in front of me for whatever reason when I add in all the stuff. So, but we'll get that in the coming episodes.
Yeah, no worries. I think it's going to be like November 2nd.
That sounds very familiar.
That sounds very familiar to me, but you know, it's all good. It's all good. You guys you'll know who's won. Okay.
And now it's story time.
It is.
How many fan submitted paranormal horror stories do you have for this week?
Well, this week, shockingly, I have 2.
Perfect.
My first tale could not come at a better time since sharing that we're going to be doing our live show from New Orleans. What better time than to go to a haunted New Orleans hotel?
Perfect.
So 2 friends have a very interesting trip down south that I am excited to share with you. And then my second tale is a very awesome Ouija board tale. And it's not like anything you're thinking. No matter what you're conjuring up in your brain right now, that's not it. It's a great story. It's beautifully written. And it's definitely one that's going to stick with you. I just know it.
I like it. I have 2 as well. And a bit of heads up, my first story has some pretty intense sexual and sacrilegious imagery in just a few moments. That first story revolves around a realtor trying and failing to sell a property that seems to clearly have something very supernaturally wrong with it. My second story, set in the woods of eastern Canada between Montreal and Toronto. 2 young men head out to go camping, see much more than they bargained for, enough for one of these young men to swear off camping forever.
Oh, how sad.
So once you've showcased this week's spoopy socks, I'll begin.
This week we have some cute polka dot. I don't know, is that like a French bulldog? Little Frenchie?
It does look like a French bulldog.
Yeah, he's cute. He feels very appropriate for like back to school.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so no setup for today's first tale. Just another disturbing story that someone out there is claiming to be true. Time now for the tale of the house on Ithaca Street. I've been a real estate agent for almost 10 years. I got into the business at the ripe old age of 19. Not necessarily because I was all that interested in being a real estate agent, but because I couldn't think of anything better to do. At the time, it seemed like everyone but me had everything figured out. It was like the second senior year ended. All my friends instantly began marching in unison towards their very clear, very attainable, very real goals that they'd been dreaming of since we were in middle school. Jessica immediately enrolled in beautician school. Leanna and Devon both got into Santa Barbara for engineering. Max was going all the way to Buffalo, New York to study business, and I was going nowhere. I couldn't keep up with their march into the future because I had no idea where I would end up. I also, to be honest, didn't really care all that much. I was fine being stagnant. So while they all went off to fulfill their ambitions and find their purpose or whatever, I went back to work at Applebee's, where I'd been waitressing every summer since I was 16. It seemed at the time like for the rest of my life, I would do nothing but serve barbecue boneless wings and overcooked cheeseburgers to townies and unhappily married old couples. And of course, serve $5 watered-down margaritas to 18-year-olds with shitty fake IDs. And most days, I was okay with that. Or at least trying to be okay with that. But then one day I finally had enough of the stench of grease and simple syrup and old meat and the classic rock playlist that kept playing the same 4 songs, and customers that didn't tip, and my pervy boss, Gerald, who always seemed to be standing right behind me while I waited for my plates at the kitchen expo, and I quit. And I was back to being nothing. Doing nothing. That was until my mom's glossy friend Sharon offered to get me a job at her real estate brokerage. She guided me through the pre-licensing course and the licensing exam and all the other stuff I needed to do in order to become an agent. At first, I felt the same way about real estate that I did about everything else I'd ever done. Apathetic. But over the years, it grew on me. I liked helping people find a home and imagining what their lives would be like there and helping them to imagine that as well. But now I'm not sure I want to do this anymore. After being a real estate agent for a decade, I've seen a lot of houses. And I've helped sell or buy plenty that weren't my favorites for people who also weren't my favorites. But I've never seen a house quite like this before. Or I guess a more accurate way to say it is, I've never been in a house that's ever made me feel like this before. Like I'm going insane. For the last 4 months, I've been trying to sell this light blue ranch-style house on Ithaca Street. The going price is $420,000. It's 3 beds and 1 bath and small, 1,375 square feet. But it sits on a full 1.5 acres of land and comes with a little prefab shed the previous owner got from Home Depot. It's not the greatest house in the world, but it's not the worst either. And so much land. It's in a nice neighborhood too, and there's lots of great schools nearby. Even has a fenced-in backyard for kids. It was built in 1963 and desperately needs updating. It clearly hasn't been remodeled since. However, it's in surprisingly pristine condition. The salt and pepper shag carpet seems hardly stepped on, and the vague Moroccan-esque pattern on the vinyl flooring is only slightly faded. No pink mold in the yellow tub or leak stains on the ceiling, and all the appliances still work just fine. Honestly, it looks like the house has never even been lived in, only taken care of. Which I realized a month into trying to get the damn place sold might literally be the case. From what I gathered, the previous owner was a townie, kind of like the type I used to serve at Applebee's. He was married once a long time ago, but his wife took the kids and moved to Annapolis sometime early on in the marriage. And now his kids are trying to sell it. He died of a heart attack a year ago and left the property to them, though as they have aggressively reiterated many times, they want nothing to do with it. Or at least they didn't want anything to do with it. They told me they wanted it gone. For the sake of their privacy, I won't share their names, but I will tell you there's 3 of them. 2 guys and a girl. I've mostly been communicating with the girl, though all 3 siblings have been pretty hands-off throughout the entire process. They told me they just wanted to get the house sold and never have to speak of it again. For a while, I thought that was because they hated their dad. And when I finally unlocked the wooden shed in the yard and saw what it concealed inside, I was sure of that. Based on the interior alone, he seemed like the kind of guy I would have hated as well. The shed had been locked from the outside since the previous owner died, and for the first time in 3 months the house was up for sale. It remained that way. We couldn't find the keys anywhere in the house or amongst the man's few belongings, and because it was a fairly nice structure and added a bit of charm to the property, we didn't want to break down the door to get in. But then one day, the oldest son of the previous owner called to let me know that he found a spare key to the shed and had mailed it to my home address. He didn't say where he found the spare key or how he got my personal address. And honestly, I didn't think too much of that at the time. I wish I had. The day the small package arrived at my door, I drove straight to the home. I parked in the short driveway, walked around the side of the house and into the backyard. I slid the key into the heavy bolt and unlocked it with a satisfying click. When I pulled the door open and stepped inside the shed, the first thing I noticed was how it smelled. Putrid and hot, like compost left out in the summer sun. It took me about 15 minutes to find the source of the odor, which was a disgusting half-peeled orange, dusty with so much mold that had somehow hidden itself in the folds of an itchy wool blanket. Once I disposed of the rotting fruit and sprayed the interior of the shed with a dangerous amount of coconut-scented Febreze, I was finally able to properly examine the space. Against one wall was a green cot with a heap of plaid wool blankets piled on top of it. At the head of the makeshift bed sat a naked pillow with no pillow sheet. I assumed it was once white, but now it's so covered in piss-yellow stains that it's hard to tell. Under the cot I found 4 jugs of water and a tattered edition of Sports Illustrated with Kate Upton on the cover. Like the pillow, the magazine was also covered in stains. I try not to think about how they were made. Next to the Sports Illustrated were 3 stacks of books. I reached under the cot and pulled them out. Most of the books had mundane titles like The Art of Fly Fishing, or World War II Fighter Planes, or A Guide to Woodworking and Furniture Making. But others were much less mundane. Under a copy of the 1952 mystery novel Beat Not the Bones was a hardback edition of Mein Kampf. Yeah, that Mein Kampf, as in Adolf Hitler's autobiographical manifesto. I was taken aback. I had never seen it in real book form before. I knew that some people read it for academic purposes or research or what have you, but I had a feeling that this guy was most likely not reading Nazi literature to prepare for his doctoral dissertation. I continued surveying the dead man's little library. The books from under his bed, I realized, were not the only ones he possessed. There were dozens more strewn all across the shed. Against the wall behind the open door, I found a haphazard stack of thriller novellas, almost as tall as the door itself. Under a moth-bitten Carhartt sweatshirt, I found a toppled-over pile of what looked like self-help books. Well, I don't know if you could actually call them self-help books. A lot of the covers were graced with pictures of women in lingerie and had names like The Art of Picking Up Hotties Online and Covert Seduction Secrets and How to Get Good Girls by Being a Bad Guy. To complete his odd collection, the dead man also had a copy of an old anatomy book called De Humani Corporis Fabrica, as well as a gynecology textbook from 1953, 2 books on taxidermy, and 6 Bibles, 2 King James versions, 2 English Standard versions, and 2 of those beginnings adventure Bibles for kids, or beginner's adventure Bibles for kids. You know, the ones where Adam and Eve are painted without nipples? Anyway, each of the holy books were riddled with incomprehensible annotations, unreadable panicked notes, sometimes scratched into the blank margins of the thin paper, sometimes scrawled across whole pages, obscuring the sacred text beneath. Although the majority of the passages the dead man wrote were complete and utter nonsense, I was able to surmise the general theme based on the few words I could decipher. I remember in one of the beginner's Bibles, which was chock full of perverted and sexual drawings as well as notes, the man had scratched the word cocksucker on every picture of Jesus' face. Slurs like that and worse were scrawled everywhere. Made me nauseous. But there's more. Not every annotation the dead man wrote was completely unintelligible. A few of his notes were written so distinctly and with such clarity that I couldn't help but read them. Like I truly couldn't help but do that. It was weird. I felt like I was compelled to. It was like I had no choice but to let the words in and let them infect me. In one of the King James Bibles, there was a poem written on a page in Luke 1, scribbled over the part of the chapter where Gabriel of Nazareth tells the Virgin Mary she will conceive and give birth to a son. The dead man had violently circled line 34 of the passage when Mary asked Gabriel, "How shall this be, seeing I know not a man?" Under that, there was this: Mother Mary the whore, Mother Mary the slut. Mother Mary will never take cock in her gut, but her slit will be butchered by the birth of the lamb, and the lamb will be butchered by the wrath of man, and man will be butchered by my father and me, because my father baptized me as legion, for we are many. It wasn't until I finished reading that grotesque poem for the 6th time in a row that I realized I was sitting on the dead man's cot. I abruptly stood up and brushed off the back of my thighs like I was brushing off dirt. In a way, I felt like I was. I thought about the dusty mold from the rotten orange and stray wool fibers from the blankets and the dead man's dead skin cells all stuck to my skin and shivered. At that point, the sun was beginning to set, and I was beginning to feel more than uneasy about being in the shed. But I couldn't stop reading the Bibles. I couldn't stop trying to piece together the horror of who this dead man was. It was like I was watching a car accident unfold right before me. I couldn't take my eyes off of it. I picked up one of the English Standard Bibles from the ground and flipped it open to a random section. I landed somewhere in the Old Testament. Across both pages open before me and in minuscule handwriting, the same disturbing sentence was written over and over and over again. Their flesh will rot while they are still standing on their feet. Their eyes will rot in their sockets. Their tongues will rot in their mouths. Their flesh will rot while they are still standing on their feet. Their eyes will rot in their sockets. Their tongues will rot in their mouths. Their flesh will rot while they are still standing on their feet. Their eyes will rot in their sockets. Their tongues will rot in their mouths. I flipped to the next page. It was the same. So was the page after that, and the page after that, and the page after that. Every single page in the Old Testament was covered in it. The dead man must have written the same sentence thousands and thousands of times. It was baffling and horrifying. But I was captivated. I don't know how long I kept reading those same sentences. Too long. The sentence sounded familiar, so I pulled out my phone and looked it up. Turns out it's an actual Bible verse from the Old Testament, Zechariah 14 to be exact. I learned from some End Times website that Zechariah 14 is all about the period of time that will happen right before the second coming, when the whole world will be at war, and Jerusalem will be invaded by the Antichrist. Lots of women will be raped, babies will be beheaded, all of the worst things will happen to all sorts of people. And during that period, God will infect all his enemies with a monstrous plague that will eat their eyes and cause their skin to decompose and their tongues to fester and decay inside their curdled mouths. As I read that, my own mouth started to feel dry. I fished some gum from my purse and decided I probably had enough biblical horror for one day, and continued checking out the rest of the shed. On the wall opposite of the cot, there was a plastic fold-out table converted into a makeshift work desk. Well, I guess it would have been a work desk, if there was anywhere to work. But the table's surface was buried under a thick, crumbling, congested layer of shit. Not literal shit, to be clear, but just a bunch of shit. Random tools and dried-out Sharpies with no lids, rusty screws and washers and bolts, empty beer cans, grease-stained McDonald's cheeseburger wrappers, a mason jar filled with pennies, a loose condom, it appeared unused, a flashlight with no light bulb, and a butcher's knife balanced daintily on an unopened package of men's XXL boxer briefs from Costco. As I was inspecting this mess of shit, I rested my hand on the one spot on the table that wasn't covered in it. To my surprise, the plastic surface wasn't smooth like I had expected, but gritty and serrated. I carefully removed as much junk from the desk as I could and placed it all on the floor. Liberated from the litter of the dead man's life, the exposed plastic tabletop looked almost blindingly white. I bent down to take a closer look and gasped. Sharp, jagged, abrasive symbols had been carved into every inch of the plastic. I stared dumbfounded at the grisly canvas, and for some reason, thought of the penultimate line of the dead man's poem, "And man will be butchered by my father and me." The carvings on the table were mesmerizing in a way. The overlapping shapes and crisscross lines, the juxtaposition of faint, faded markings against the angry slashes that cut deep into the plastic. There was this unadulterated pandemonium to it. It was the work of an insane person, the violent barrage of runes like an equation no one but the mad could calculate. But then it hit me. It wasn't a mosaic of meaningless symbols, it was the same symbol, carved over and over and over again. The skin of the table had been maimed with hundreds and hundreds of inverted pentagrams. I thought I was going to be sick. I felt a lump grow in my throat like a tumor and chills crawling up my spine. I was terrified. I mean, at that point, I knew the dead man had most definitely been some sort of satanic incel Nazi piece of shit, but he was a dead piece of shit, so I had no reason to be afraid of him. But the pentagrams on the tabletop, they felt alive. Still staring at the hellish engravings, I took a deep breath and rubbed my palms together for comfort, a nervous tic I've had since grade school. But as I did, I was struck with this horrible stinging feeling, like grainy salt and lemon juice grinding into an open wound. I opened my hands. Carved deep into the center of each of my palms was a single, bloody, inverted pentagram, and I screamed. My knees buckled beneath me, sour bile filled the back of my throat, my vision went blurry. I clutched my hands together to stop the bleeding and looked wildly around me for a way to escape. It was a tiny room, and the door was right behind me, but in that moment I was so disoriented and confused I felt lost in those four walls. It didn't feel like I was in some little backyard shed. I felt like I was in an endless pitch-black forest and there was no way out. Suddenly I was overwhelmed with the sensation that someone was standing right behind me, breathing heavily. I spun around to meet my assailant, but found only the shed door behind my back. With my hands still clenched together, I shoved my shoulder against the wooden door and stumbled out into the wet grass outside. And then I ran. I ran as fast as I could, as hard as I could, towards the back door of the house, which was dangling wide open. I was too inundated with fear to notice how strange that was, given I had been sure to lock both doors when I left the other day and hadn't unlocked either since. But I didn't question the open doors. I barreled through it and into the outdated kitchen of the house on Ithaca Street. Nor did I question how it was possible that every single light in the house was on and glowing brightly, even though I had turned them all off. All I could think about was my bloody hands and the dead man's poem. Her slit will be butchered by the birth of the lamb, and the lamb will be butchered by the wrath of man, and man will be butchered by my father and me, because my father baptized me as legion, for we are many. I rushed down the narrow hallway of the single-story home and practically launched myself into its only bathroom, quickly slamming closed and locking the door behind me. I turned on the sink and placed my shaky hands under the cold stream. The water ran clear. There was no blood. I turned my palms upwards. There was no cut, no pentagrams, no phantom wounds. My skin was as it had been before I stepped inside the shed, unbroken. It felt like the air had been sucked out of my chest. I rested my hands on the brim of the turquoise sink and stared at the running tap water. The sound of it splashing against the porcelain was deafening. I couldn't take it. I furiously switched the water off. The silence that followed was abrupt and it cut like a knife, but there was something underneath the quiet. A voice. It was less than a whisper, but it didn't need to speak loudly for me to know what it said. Your flesh will rot while you stand. Your eyes will rot in their sockets. Your tongue will rot in your mouth. Slowly, I raised my head to look into the mirror. I was infected. The skin on my face was infested with bubbling, bulging pustules and boils and sores dripping with fatty yellow fluids and watery blood. My lips were cracked and flaking like they'd been sliced off my face and laid out to dry in the sun like jerky. My eyes were spoilt and melting. The liquid that was once my corneas was congealing in my eyelashes, the thin skin on my eyelids loose and wilting like drapes over the entrance to the empty sockets. I jerked open my jaw and it cracked. My gums were raw like the skin under a popped blister. Blood was seeping down the little canyons between my rotten teeth. My tongue was no longer a tongue. It was a withered up, concave, sunken into itself thing, glutted with wet, streaming mold like maggots. I stared at my wretched, diseased reflection and it stared right back at me. Both of our chests heaved heavy, ragged breaths in unison. I tilted my head to the right. It did too. I felt inhumanly calm. I think I was shell-shocked. I was in a nightmare or having a stroke, or I'd been drugged, or maybe I was dead. Couldn't be real. Nothing that abhorrent could be real. I felt like my skull was flooded with mucus that my mind was trying not to drown in. That's the only way I can describe how alienated from my own consciousness I was starting to feel, staring at my rotten reflection. But the fog began to clear, or maybe I began to clear the fog, when I caught a glimpse of something in the mirror. Not my festering, diseased reflection, but something behind it, something outside the window. I turned around to face the bathroom window and peered out into the yard. Night was inching closer and closer, but what little light was left was enough for me to see it. The door to the shed was being slowly pulled shut by a long, pale arm. The shock and the delusion I had fallen into was fading, and my sense of reality, if you can call it that, was returning to me. I looked back at the mirror. My hands were clean of blood. My face was unmarred, uninfected, and in one piece. My eyeballs were back. Time now suddenly felt like it was picking up speed, coming upon me too fast for me to escape. My heart was beating out of my chest. I felt sweat drip down my temples. I heard every light bulb in the house buzzing like flies. What the fuck am I doing, I thought. Who turned on all the lights? Who left the door open? Who's in the shed? Fuck. Panic, lurid, sharp panic hit me like a freight train. I started to cry. I was terrified, but of what exactly I couldn't identify. It was a double-edged fear. I was scared that I might be going insane, that it was all in my head. The bloody pentagrams carved into my hands, my sickly body and decomposing face in the mirror before me, the pale arm that closed the shed door. But I was also scared that it wasn't. I was scared that all of this was real, that the devil was waiting for me in that shed and there was nothing I could do but rot. I took my car keys and phone out of my purse. I armed myself with my phone in one hand and heavy glass soap dish I'd found on the bathroom counter in the other. I figured whether it was the devil or a murderer or nothing at all waiting for me outside the door somewhere, it couldn't hurt to have something I could try and bash their skull in with. I dialed 911. As soon as it started to ring, I unlocked the door and ran to the front entrance. In my blurry peripheral vision, the house seemed to mutate around me. It wasn't a clean, charming 1960s ranch home anymore. It was an undulating shithole, muggy with a wretched sickness and decaying like a rotten tooth. The front door was wide open. By the time I was hurling myself into the driver's seat of my car, someone on the other line finally answered. 911, what's your emergency? I'm at 6615 Ithaca Street. There's an intruder here. I think he's trying to kill me. Please help me, please. I responded in a hurried, quivering voice while jerking the gear shift into reverse. I pressed on the gas and started backing up as fast as I could down the twisted driveway. Well, do you deserve it? Asked the operator. I slammed on the brakes. What? What'd you say? I said, do you deserve it to be killed? The operator asked once again, slower this time, like he was asking a toddler if they shit their pants. I don't understand. No, I don't deserve. I don't, I whimpered. I knew I should hang up and drive away, but I felt paralyzed. I felt trapped. The operator sighed. Well, we think you do. I don't, please, I protested through stops. Ma'am, please do not interrupt us, he said sternly. I held my breath. What I was saying, ma'am, is that we believe you do deserve it, he continued. You deserve it all. You deserve to have your slits sliced and slaughtered like the meat of a fat fucking pig is peeled and chopped and diced. You deserve to rot forever in the cavernous filth of your own excavated intestines. You deserve to bubble over with sickness, with tumors, with ulcers, with blood. You deserve to be butchered. You all do. Click. Call ended blinked on the screen. I let the phone slip out of my limp fingers and clatter onto the floor. I squeezed my eyes shut, gripping the steering wheel with both hands, and raised my head to the sky. I screamed. I screamed with fury and rage and hate from within the deepest part of my soul. When the sound died in the air, I lowered my head and opened my eyes. As I did, I caught a glimpse of the front door of the little blue house on Ithaca Street slammed shut. I drove away. The next day, I informed the dead man's 3 children that I was no longer able to serve as their realtor and would be releasing them of their contract. Only the girl called me back. During our brief conversation, she told me in a quiet voice that it was actually a good thing I was releasing them from the contract. She told me her oldest brother, the one who sent me the keys to the shed, now wanted to buy his siblings out of the house and was offering cash to do so. Did he know? I wondered. Did he know what was happening in that house, in that shed? Is he a part of it? I said I was happy everything was going to work out and that I wished them all the best. I wanted to say more. I wanted to tell her what happened, tell her what I saw, ask her if she ever saw anything similar, ask her if it was real or if I was going insane. Instead, I just thanked them for choosing me to be their realtor, and that I hope we could work together again in the future. I don't think I'll ever understand what happened at that house, or why it happened to me, or if it'll ever happen again. I don't think I even have it in me to try to understand. I'm certainly not going to ask the brother. Anyone who wants to own that house is not someone I ever want to be around. If I haven't lost my mind already, searching for answers about the house on Ithaca Street surely will make me go insane. It's been a few weeks since that night in the shed, and I've semi-successfully convinced myself that some of the horror I witnessed was all in my head. Some kind of waking dream or something. Or that maybe there was a gas leak. I don't know. It's the only way I can survive, I think. The only way I can move forward. But I still check my cheeks for boils and pustules, still lick my gums in search of the metallic taste of blood, still wiggle my teeth to test if they're falling out, still lightly touch my eyes to make sure they're not melting, and I still stare at the lines on my palm looking for hidden inverted pentagrams.
Yikes, yikes. Okay. I don't know if I've ever talked about this. I'm sure I have. But I was a realtor for like a hot minute.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking about how fucking terrifying that would be. Because as a realtor, you are in so many weird spaces
Oh, yeah.
by yourself
Yeah.
all the time. It is like actually a weirdly dangerous job in that way.
Yeah.
And like you take all these safety classes, and a lot of the realtors I worked with packed. Like they were like, I'm not, especially like around here where you're going and showing 5 acres of land
Mhm.
with no other houses around. And it was a very much like a never go alone and all these things. So I'm just like picturing this like cute young girl, and I was like, oh, honey, no, 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 no.
Yeah, and then finding that shed.
And just I kept waiting for the story to twist in a different way. I did not expect the outcome that the one brother was going to buy out the other 2 siblings.
Yeah.
That is not what I saw coming. What I saw coming was that she leaves the shed, goes home, starts doing research, and finds out that like the dad was some crazed killer.
Mm-hmm.
I was expecting to find
like bodies or something.
Yes,
Yeah.
manifesto, bodies in the backyard, that he had like raped and murdered a lot of women. Like just,
Yeah.
I mean, maybe he did, and we just don't know. But that's what it felt like. That I felt like this was the backstory to some psychopath serial killer.
Yeah, it did feel like a serial killer where they would be living, or
Ugh.
kind of like the Hollywood version of a serial killer. Maybe usually they're not. I mean, there's a few that have really disturbing setups at home. Yeah, I guess I feel like a Jeffrey Dahmer, like one of the more extreme serial killers where they don't have that compartmentalization as much as some others. They don't have like a wife and kids at home.
Yeah.
Like their actual like home is more like I don't know, like a den or something, like an
torture
animal's den.
chamber.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I was thinking like Toy Box Killer,
Oh yeah.
ETK, like those kinds of like really Toy Box Killer, just
Yeah.
really torturous, awful,
Mm-hmm.
hate women. Ugh, golly. Yeah. Nope. And also like as a realtor, the hell do you do if you do figure out your house is haunted? The house that you're selling,
Yeah. Especially like, I mean, it'd be one thing to hear about it being haunted and stuff like, oh, okay. But if you yourself personally have a really terrible experience there,
Exactly.
I think you just gotta walk away from it. Be like, I can't sell your place like this person did.
Yeah, and there's different rules in different states about what you have to disclose or not disclose.
Yeah.
Deaths in the house and or other things.
Yeah.
Oh, now I'm imagining there's not really photos that go along with this story.
No, I have some photos of just some things referenced in the story, and one photo that's supposedly maybe of that shed.
Yeah.
For the photos, quick little note: some of our Roberts and Annabelles on Patreon have been asking for photos to accompany the early release of these episodes on Patreon. Well, they are all loaded into the bottom of the Patreon episode description. So
Yeah.
you just got to scroll down past all the script or like all the notes, and you will see them. You can just look at them. You can look at them as you listen.
Yeah. And they should be there going back pretty far.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I get the confusion because if you just
Totally.
glance at it, you wouldn't see them there. You just got to scroll down. So,
Yeah.
Scroll down. Pick a Lynze socks also on there if you scroll to the bottom. Also for YouTube listeners, when we bring up Lynze's socks, we're going to be adding a pic of her socks as you listen when we bring up the socks or the pics that accompany these stories. Those pictures will appear on screen. And yeah, sorry we didn't think of that right away. And thanks for the feedback.
Yeah. I can't remember the name of the fan who was like, hey, would it be possible to put the episode pics like at the YouTube, whatever, like minute markers? And I was like, oh my God, what dingbats. Just when
Yeah.
you're trying out a new system, sometimes things get lost along the way. So thanks for bearing with us.
Yeah, thank you. So here's the first pic I have is just of one of the books found in the shed, just how creepy this would be to see this, a copy of this book, De Humani Corporis Fabrica, like this old anatomy book.
This is
Like, why would you have that if you're not a doctor? I mean, or I guess like or a student of, I don't know, like a collector of random old books or something.
Well, here's the thing. That book in our house, not scary. Because it's like also on a bookshelf with like family photo albums and
Yeah.
how to responsibly do drugs for adults or whatever that like book is.
Silly book,
and then like, Dave Grohl's autobiography.
Right.
In that context, it's just like, oh, cool. Maybe they
Yeah.
found this at a flea market or
Yeah,
like
yeah.
somebody gave it to them, whatever.
That's true.
In a creepy, dark,
Like murder
stinky
shed.
murder shed, different story.
Yeah, especially when it's next to like Mein Kampf. There's
Oh
a
my God.
copy of that book.
Fucking psychopath.
Ugh. And then just the only picture that supposedly accompanies this here is just the shed.
The shed.
God, yeah, just for some reason that is maybe even creepier than if it was like a room in the house. This little shed in the backyard on this acreage.
I know sheds in general can be a little,
Yeah.
Disturbing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Are you, do you have anything more, or do you ready to leave that story behind?
I just was making a note that is related but not, but like really funny that I crack myself up about all the time. She says like at the end, she still continues to like check her face for infections or whatever.
Yeah.
I love that to this day. I'm not somebody who loves shellfish, but if I do really enjoy a crab cake. Every time I have a crab cake, I start to roll my tongue around in my mouth to make sure it's not swelling because I may have suddenly developed a shellfish allergy.
Like you're worried that you could just randomly suddenly develop it?
I mean, and I guess you can just like develop allergies. It would be pretty interesting if I just randomly developed one that required an EpiPen.
Yeah, just a really severe one out of nowhere.
But I freak myself out every time like, oh no, my tongue does feel a little thick.
Funny.
I'm fine. And that is all.
Okay. Not a lot of setup for this second story, but a little. The thick Algonquin forests of eastern Canada have long been the setting of creepy stories and things that are in general hard to explain for hundreds of years. The popular cryptid legend of the Wendigo, that malevolent human-like creature, comes from the Algonquin tribe. Even now, online forums discussing unexplained events from within the dense, sparsely populated forests are filled with people sharing their own paranormal and otherwise creepy stories. Such as a post from 2017 of one person sharing their own truly unsettling experience. This post only had one comment, and it looks like the person who shared it may have created a burner account to do so, but I think that the lack of attention being sought from this claim in a way makes it more believable, since it doesn't look like whoever wrote this post was trying to gain any sort of online fame or notoriety. So here it is. Time now for the tale of a thick fog in a dark forest. I'm so glad forums like this exist, because I really need to get this story off my chest. I think if I told my therapist about it, I'd be institutionalized. It's been 4 or 5 years now since it happened, and while I wish I could say I'm writing this all down now because I'm worried if I don't soon, I'll forget about it, that's so far from the truth. I think about it almost every day. Prior to the events I'll be sharing, I was super outdoorsy. I'd always loved hiking, camping, kayaking, all that stuff. But now I hate leaving the city. I moved to Toronto a few months after this happened, and while I tell everyone it was for work, and it partially was, it was mostly because I couldn't live out in the country any longer. It happened on a weekend in mid-October. Me and 3 of my friends had been planning on spending the weekend camping at the Bonnechere River, fishing, hiking, relaxing, smoking quite a bit of weed. 2 of my friends had already gotten there, and I was driving up with my other friend, who I'm going to call Mark. We'd all lived around the Algonquin forest our entire lives, and this wasn't even the first time we'd camped on the Bonnechere, so we felt pretty relaxed about it. Mark and I grabbed dinner at Barry's Bay, about a half an hour away, and then started driving up just as it was getting dark. We were taking my car, and it's just a straight shot up Paw Lake Road. I've done it quite a few times. It's a curvy, lonely road through some pretty dense forest, but with very few turns and spots where you can get lost. So we weren't even bothering to use any maps. The first 15 minutes were pretty smooth. There was a light fog, but we made it up to the little fishing community of Paw Lake, no problem. This is where it gets difficult to explain. As we drove through Paw Lake, the fog started to thicken. By the time we had got past the last road in the community, it had gotten so dense I had to drive painfully slow. We were a little annoyed, but we were pretty close, so it didn't seem like a big deal. But then just as the fog swallowed us up, my speakers crackled for a few seconds, followed by the music stopping abruptly, and a loud static filling the car. Mark quickly turned the speakers off, and I took a look at my phone. For some reason, I didn't have any cell data, and when he checked his phone, he didn't either. We thought this was pretty weird since the last few times we've been up there, we'd had our cell data the whole way. We figured it must have just been messed up by the fog. We laughed about the first world problem of having to sit in a car with no music playing and kept going. But only a few seconds later, a deer seemingly appeared out of the fog, standing right in the middle of the road. I was going super slow, but I still didn't see it until I was about 15 feet from it. I slammed hard on my brakes, stopped basically 5 feet in front of it, let out a massive sigh of relief after stopping, and Mark jokingly yelled at it to get out of the way. But it didn't leave. It just stared at us. I know that might not sound like a really weird thing for a deer to do, deer in the headlights and all that, but this was different. It was looking right at us, but its eyes were a weird milky white. We waited there for probably a minute or two, and then Mark joked about how easy it would be to scare a blind deer. We quickly gave up on the chance of the deer moving, and I backed up a little and then drove around it. But as I drove around it, the deer's head didn't move. It just kept staring off into the fog. And as soon as we got past it, the fog cleared up abruptly. It looked like a gray, cloudy wall in my rearview mirror, and I could see that the deer was still looking off into it. I started picking up speed again, but honestly, I was pretty creeped out, so I still wasn't going super fast. But even still, we shouldn't have been more than like 20 minutes from the campground. That's why we got pretty confused when we've been driving for another 30 minutes and still hadn't gotten there. This section of the road doesn't have any side roads, so it's not like we could have taken a wrong turn. We couldn't check maps since our phones still didn't have any data, but we agreed that if we drove for 10 more minutes and didn't get there, we'd stop. The 10 minutes came and went, and we weren't recognizing our route at all. I was really creeped out now. Mark was convinced that we'd somehow made a wrong turn, but I knew that was literally impossible. I pulled off to the side of the road, and we tried sending a text to our friends apologizing for being so late, but of course the data still wasn't working. I pulled a U-turn, but as soon as I was facing the other side of the road, I froze. 20 feet in front of us, a man was walking across the road. He was tall, walked with an odd spring in his step, like the ground beneath his feet somehow had a little bounce to it. He wore a tattered brown coat, baggy brown pants, and tall black boots. He had a nice black hat on that didn't match the rest of his outfit, and halfway across the road, he tipped it towards us. And I could see that under it, he flashed us a big smile with gross yellow teeth. He walked on, disappearing into the trees, and I turned to Mark and asked him what the hell someone was doing walking out around there. We were at least a 40-minute drive from the nearest house, and the closest campsite was the one we were currently struggling to find. Even during the day in the summer, there was no reason a person should be out and about there. But this was mid-October, and it was now pitch black out. Mark replied that he agreed it was a little weird, but also said that he regretted not asking him for directions. Asking him for directions? I restrained myself from screaming at him and just said that I thought that the guy seemed pretty creepy. Mark just shrugged. We drove on. I was moving pretty fast now. I wanted to get off that road as soon as possible. I didn't say anything to Mark, but if we found our way back to civilization, there was no chance I was turning around again and heading back out there that night. I would have bought a room in a hotel back at Barry's Bay, slept in the car, anything but getting lost in the fog again. We'd only been driving back the way we came for 10 minutes when I had to stop again. A deer, this time dead in the middle of the road, made me slam my brakes again. I was so creeped out that I just started to drive past it, but Mark told me to stop. He said he wanted to check on it. I told him that he sounded crazy, but he said he wanted to see if it was actually dead. In all fairness, it didn't look very hurt. Its neck was stained with some blood, but it didn't look like one of those grotesque roadkill deers. I told him I was definitely staying in the car, but that he could go out and take a quick look if he wanted. Mark was somehow not creeped out at all and walked over towards it. Right as he stooped down to take a look at it, my eyes darted to something moving behind him, and I gasped. The same strange man we'd seen earlier. What was he doing? He was staring at Mark, grinning wildly, bouncing towards him. I felt like time froze. I shot a look at Mark, still oblivious, and looked back at the man. The car headlights illuminated his face, and I wished they hadn't. His yellow teeth were fully bared, and it felt like his skin was pulled too tight across his face. His beady black eyes were open wide, his gross, patchy eyebrows raised. After the image of this crazy-looking man had been seared into my brain, I experienced a sensation that I can only describe as my soul coming back into my body. It felt like one of those dreams where you fall off a cliff and wake up so abruptly your body shakes. In a panic, I opened my car door and yelled at Mark to get back in the fucking car right now. He looked up at me, confused, but I yelled again, "Get in the fucking car, Mark!" And he finally listened. My eyes didn't leave the man while I yelled at Mark, and I saw him look up at me. He grinned even wider, tearing through the skin on his cheeks. There was no flesh behind the skin, it was just black. The man stood still, slowly raised his hands in a playful, giving up way. I thought I saw the glint of something metal in one of them. Just as Mark opened the door, he turned and bounced back into the force. What the hell? Mark got in the car and asked me why I had to scare him like that. I started to tell him that I saw the man behind him, but he cut me off to tell me that would be impossible, and patronizingly explained that I was just worked up because of the dead deer scaring me. I told him he was being an asshole, and he just laughed. I started driving again, fast. He asked what the hell had gotten into me, but I just ignored him. In one final attempt to lighten the mood, Mark said that he thought it was a pretty crazy coincidence that the deer had the same milky white eyes as the first one. I snapped back. Are you serious? Don't joke about that, Mark. Come on. He told me that he was serious. Asked me to tell him what was going on with me. How was he this oblivious? I told him I was really scared, and he finally left me alone. Could that have been the same deer? There was no way we had made it all the way back to the spot where we first saw it, but there was also no way that the man should have been there either, so it's not like anything else was making sense. I decided I really didn't want to think about it and just kept driving. We'd been going for probably 5 minutes more when I hit the fog again. I didn't even slow down until I saw Mark white-knuckling the handle. I still went faster than I normally would have, and after a few more minutes in the fog, we popped out of it again. I assumed we'd be back in Paw Lake, but we drove past a sign saying, "Welcome to Bonnechere River Provincial Park." Our date had started working again, and Mark checked his phone, and sure enough, we were almost at the campsite. Also, it was nearly midnight. We left around 7 p.m. How could we have spent longer than 2 hours on that drive? I tried bringing both these things up to Mark, but now he seemed adamant that nothing odd had happened. He told me that the next time we came, he would be driving, and that we must have just gotten lost somehow. He seemed annoyed with me that we were getting to the campsite so late, as if it was all my fault, and there was no arguing with him. And that's it. We made it to the campsite, apologized for being so late, saying we got pretty lost. I didn't even attempt to explain anything to my other friends. I mean, what were the odds that they were going to believe me without Mark backing me up? I tried not to make a fuss that weekend, but I really did not enjoy the trip. Once we got back, I kind of intentionally drifted away from those friends and started looking for work in the city. I wish I could have handled it better, but I really just didn't know what to do. I just wanted to get away. Life is going pretty well now. I've made some new friends in the city, and I'm doing all right at my new job. But I can't stop thinking about that night. How did any of that happen? What was wrong with that deer? Where did the time go? Why didn't our data work? And who the hell was that man?
About halfway through that story, I got so entranced with your tattoos.
Oh, yeah.
Dan has like this like Alex Gray looking character, and then this devil skull guy with a helix. And I just was like, oh God, what if that comes to life right now? I just got like really, really scared in my head. I'm like, oh my God, that's the guy from The Road.
That'd be a crazy like haunted moment of like seeing somebody else's tattoo. Like,
just kind of like wink at you or like it's like smile stretch or something. I don't know. I don't like it right now.
Ooh, what if it like moved off of the person, then you saw it later?
If it just gave any indication of not being
like eyes,
ink in your body, if it was anything more than that. Okay, also this story had me thinking about Kyler and his buddy. They're on a cross-country road trip. And I'm like, oh God, like we did not have a talk with him about like, do not, like don't stop, don't anything.
Don't pick up hitchhikers.
Yeah, and it's like, I know inherently like him and his buddy are smart and I don't actually think that they would and all the things, but like also, do you know about Wendigos? Do you guys know about the Hat Man? Like, I feel like we should have had like a little paranormal prep talk.
I would love it if Kyler thought he saw a Wendigo or something, because it would just change him in a way like he's, he's very, very skeptical, which, I was very skeptical when we started the show.
Yeah.
Less so now, but I think it would soften him in a cool way.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, he did kind of in this last year soften about theology, as so I think like he is starting to explore those ideas that maybe there's something bigger than him.
Yeah.
Oh, but he is the worst to watch a horror movie with.
Yeah, he's getting a little better, but yes, I think he's working on Scared to Death. I think has gotten him into it more, and we watched some stuff together this summer, and I think he gets spooked a little bit now in moments. So yeah, who knows what's coming over the next few years?
Yeah, well, he's not sweet baby boy living in his parents' house anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the world can be a scary place.
Yeah, sure can. Yeah, that was great. Just that lost time, and also what the fuck's going on with Mark? Why is he being such a dick? It feels like, I don't know, the author of the story, what have you.
Yeah.
They don't say it, but it feels like that's out of character for Mark. And so I kept waiting for them to like get to the campsite and then Mark kind of to like snap to and be himself.
I thought that was weird too. Yeah, like, I mean, I guess there's like, with these kind of things, they wouldn't have to necessarily, since there's no rules that we know of, wouldn't have to reveal themselves to one person like they would to another.
Oh.
But that would truly be maddening. Like, what if Mark didn't notice any of this stuff? Like, what if you're on a road trip with somebody, just the two of you in the car?
What if on Thursday when we're driving to Missoula?
Yeah, you and I are driving to Missoula. You definitely see something that is terrifying and obvious. Like, not a glimpse. It's just right there, I don't know, 5-10 seconds. You're looking right at it.
Totally.
I don't notice it. Or, even worse in a way, I see, quote unquote, see it, but what I see is clearly not exactly what you see.
That would suck so bad. And also just like the dynamic that we have as well. at a certain point, I know I would get so upset. I would be crying. You wouldn't believe me. You would think I was being dramatic. Like you would assign all these attributes and I would be so upset at what I saw and then so furious that you just didn't believe me. Because it's like, why would I make something like that up? I don't want to see something like that. But like the human reaction, I understand is like, okay.
I know, because then the other person, if they really didn't see anything, then from my perspective, if you were just so adamant, but I did look at what you saw, but just didn't see at all what you saw, then it would be like so maddening the other way. Where I'm like, why is she mad at me? I mean,
I'm mad at you for not believing me.
I have some pictures.
Okay.
This first photo is just of the road that they were traveling along.
On the road again.
Yep. So just, pretty rustic little road there, not paved, not even much gravel on it, just like a little dirt road.
But like completely normal in terms of what you're expecting probably when you're driving to a campground.
Yeah, totally. But a terrible place to see a random weird dude walking around at night.
I know. What was that guy?
I don't know. The weird like detail about the darkness under his flesh or something.
Because the deer was like, ugh, but I did not see the dude coming. That I think that's the detail of the story that scared me the most.
This is a photo of the Bonachère River.
Okay, pretty.
Just a little lazy river out there.
Kind of reminds me of some lakes around here.
I know. Yeah, this is like, I wonder if it's just like a little like back eddy of the river, or if it's like truly like a super slow river. Might be. And then just because it was brought up, here's an illustration of a Wendigo. From an article at medium.com. The artist's name is not listed. And then finally, just an AI generated image of a tall man standing alone in a forest. He's even got a little hat. That guy.
There's nothing about that scares me.
Yeah, I couldn't find a picture that did that story justice. This is the closest I could find.
Yeah.
If it was darker, it's like a sepia tone thing. And if you could like zoom out, or like if you knew that there's no reason for a person to be there, it could be creepy.
He just he looks like he's wearing like a newsboy cap. So he just looks like some like Englishman out for a stroll.
Funny.
It's not scaring me.
Oh, AI. You gotta figure out the
AI, get it together. If only we had time to contact artists, have them draw, show art specific to every
Yeah, very quickly.
Very quickly and get it 1000% correct.
Yeah, can you do this? Can you do this illustration in 20 minutes?
And match it exactly what I see in my brain. God. Okay. Well done on your side. That first story is going to bother me for a long time. I'm already finding myself my brain is kind of like, what's in our shed? I'm the only one that really ever goes in there. So you should you should be worried about what's in the shed.
True.
You don't know what I'm doing out there.
Just the one detail, the detail that creeped me out the most about that story was that if you found an old Bible and every single page of the Old Testament, which is not a small amount of pages.
No, it's not.
There was that creepy refrain written over and over and over and over. I mean, God, at the very least, then forget about like paranormal. You're dealing with somebody who is wildly mentally unstable.
Yeah, the ramblings of a crazy man.
Yeah, probably dangerous.
Okay, well now you get to relax, Dan.
Okay,
now do you want to get your Layla?
I got one.
Oh, Black Layla. Okay, well let's head to New Orleans. Hey, Dan and Lynze.
Hello.
I've been a longtime fan of Dan's stand-up and fell in love with your guys' podcast after deciding to indulge in my love of the paranormal, and I often listen in my haunted office building. Not my brightest idea.
Thank you.
This story happened to me about 2 weeks ago, and I'm still trying to process it all. About 2 weeks ago, I traveled to New Orleans with my friend Beth on a trip that was part business, part fun. We went back and forth about where to stay and the possibility of staying at a haunted hotel. I was originally pushing for a haunted hotel, but Beth eventually talked me out of it, saying, "Michaela, don't be an idiot. You won't sleep if we stay somewhere haunted," which, to be fair, is generally pretty accurate. Normally, I don't try to provoke anything paranormal, but I do have the occasional Darren-like tendencies. After a little bit more searching, we settled on a hotel near the French Market named Villa Convento. I looked up the hotel online and didn't immediately see anything that labeled it as haunted, so I figured we were in the clear. We booked a single room with a king bed that had a balcony overlooking the street. Our first night there, we opted to grab dinner, walk around a little bit, but we did not partake in the typical Bourbon Street debauchery since we'd been up since 4 a.m. and spent the majority of the day traveling. I mention this because when I told my dad this story, he laughed it off and asked me, "How drunk were you, kiddo?" Normally, I have a little bit of difficulty falling asleep, but not that night. I fell asleep quickly and slept almost the entire night. I woke up a little bit after 3 a.m. to a dark room illuminated only by a slightly open curtain. I was sleeping on the left side of the bed when I opened my eyes, and I saw a woman standing at the edge of the bed on the right side opposite me. The woman was about 5'7", with long, straight hair and appeared incredibly rigid. The woman was pacing back and forth, and after the third lap, I finally said, "Beth, what are you doing?" With her back towards me, she half turned to assess me before turning backwards towards the door and walking away. I thought, okay, that's weird. We'll address that in the morning. And I promptly went back to sleep. The next morning, we were getting ready, and I asked Beth if she'd had trouble sleeping the night before. She looked at me, confused, asking what I meant, and I told her that I saw her pacing the floor in front of the bed. She just shrugged, and we chalked it up to a weird dream. The rest of the weekend, we explored the quarter and eventually learned that the Ursuline Convent, which was built in 1745, was kitty corner to our hotel, and deduced that this must be what our hotel was named after. We had fun eating our way through the quarter, but my weird dream never left my mind. It did help slightly that Saturday and Sunday night, I didn't have any more weird dreams, just a little bit of trouble with falling asleep, which I blamed on being somewhere new. Monday night, we decided to go on a vampire tour of the French Quarter, and if you're ever in New Orleans, I cannot recommend this enough. Our guide's name was Cedric, and he's both a tour guide and a paranormal investigator. As he's leading us through the quarter at 9 o'clock at night on an abnormally chilly, slightly overcast September night, 3 days before the full moon, he's telling century-old stories of monsters that stalk the streets of the old city, as well as his own personal paranormal experiences in an atmosphere where you can't help but believe everything. My friend and I were completely enthralled by the tour. We were walking down Ursuline Street, and he points at the haunted hotel and tells us he did an investigation there last week and is still sifting through evidence from room 116. Beth nudges me and says, "Look how close we came to staying there." Cedric asks if it was on our short list of hotels, and we both chuckled, explaining that we'd been too nervous to stay somewhere haunted. As we're passing by the Villa Convento, Cedric asks where we are staying, and I point up and say, "Right there, that's our balcony, and it's not haunted." Cedric shakes his head and says, "Oh, that's not true. It was owned by the nuns until 1804 and has quite a history. I'd suggest you look it up. It's hard to find some place in the French Quarter that isn't haunted." I look at Beth, and in a calm but anxious tone, I say, "I don't think I had just a bad dream on Friday night." Cedric immediately stops dead in his tracks, asking what I meant, and I explained to him what happened on the first night, and then paused at the end of my explanation and said, "You know what? I don't think she actually had long hair. I think she was wearing a habit." The image of what I saw was clear in my mind and is clearer now even as I write this. If anything, what I saw makes more sense after learning about the history of the hotel. At the time, I wasn't thinking about nuns and traditional clothing, but learning that was like finding the missing puzzle piece. I tried to shake off what I just realized as we stopped at the convent for the last story of the night. I won't give too much away about the spooky history of the Ursuline Convent, but one of the main points Cedric talked about was the shutters on the third floor, which had apparently been nailed shut at an early point in the convent's history. As the story goes, vampires live on the third floor, and the only time those shutters are open is when they're hunting. If this happens, you won't find a single New Orleanian within a 3-block radius of the convent. Now, thoroughly spooked and keeping my eyes locked on those shutters, Cedric tells more tales of the convent and the house across the street. We finish up the tour, and Beth and I hurry back to our hotel just a few hundred feet away. We race into our hotel room, slam and lock our door while also making sure the balcony door is locked before shutting the drapes. Then, Beth admitted to me that she had lied about thinking that I had had a bad dream. She figured I'd probably seen something, but didn't want to scare me. Awesome. That night, I had trouble falling asleep, and when I finally did, I was met with fitful dreams that seemed all too real. In my dreams, I was lying in bed and heard a soft voice calling out to me to open the blinds. This voice called to me over and over again until I got up, walked to the blinds, opened them and the balcony door, and then sat down at the little table on the balcony overlooking the convent. One of the third-floor shutters was open, and a blonde figure was making her way towards me from the direction of the convent. We locked eyes. I woke up in a panic, a feeling of dread washing over me. Do not open your eyes, I thought to myself. The feeling that someone or something was watching me was so strong. I laid still on my back with my eyes squeezed closed for about an hour, the feeling of dread never going away, before falling asleep again and then waking up in the exact same dream. Eventually, I woke up again, and this time the feeling of doom was gone. I opened my eyes to sunlight filtering into the room under the drapes. Sitting up and stretching, I turned to my friend, who looked like she had had about the same quality of sleep I had. Stifling a yawn, I said, "So, I know this could have been because we went on a vampire tour, like right before bed, but I had the weirdest dream last night." And then I launched into my dream and that feeling of dread, leaving out that I thought someone was watching me. Her eyes grew wide during the story. When I was done, she looked at me dead in the eyes and said, "I had a similar dream, and when I woke up, I had that same feeling, almost as if someone was standing over me." Now it was my turn to be shocked, as she filled in the missing details of my own nightmare. We attempted to shrug it off as we started to pack, thankful that our time in New Orleans was over. Although we were sad to leave the city, we were more than happy to say goodbye to the Ursuline convent. Since coming home, I have experienced a few weird feelings and seen some figures out of the corner of my eye, but I'm trying to just blame that on living out in the country. Stay spooky, stay weird. Michaela.
Thanks, Michaela.
That's like so classic New Orleans.
Mm-hmm. I know. I was thinking like when we went on our ghost tour so many years ago.
Yes.
They pointed out that convent as well and told us about the shutters and the vampire legends and stuff. And,
Yep.
Yep. And that is like such a thing where, yeah, good luck finding a building anywhere in the quarter that doesn't have some haunted legend attached to it.
Yeah.
So I like that they thought they were staying in like a regular hotel, but he's like, no, there's plenty of legends associated with that one as well.
I know. I also was recalling that. I remember doing that with the kids, and I do wonder, I'll have to like do a little bit of research, if that like third story shutters thing, like, oh, you won't see any locals out if those shutters open, like,
Oh, yeah. I'm sure they hype things up for sure.
Oh, no, I know that, but I'm just like curious, like, what is that about? And is that just their own fun little game that they like to play on visitors? And
I doubt hardly any locals would even look to see, like, are the shutters closed or not? Like, no one's going to change there. Almost no one.
I don't know, though, because also, like, the city is so old, and it is.
Yeah.
I was actually having these thoughts as I was putting this together, like, God, if you grow up in New Orleans, I wonder if you just have a different relationship with the paranormal. Like, it's just kind of a part of your culture, your growing up, your experience, and maybe maybe you have more reverence for it, but also maybe you have more like, get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, I guess it could go either way, huh? Where you're just like inundated with it all the time. Because it is unusual that way, where I know Savannah has a lot of ghost tours, but and I was Salem. Yeah, I've only been to those places very briefly and just once. So I don't have the best comparison, but I've never noticed another city that has more haunted lore than the French Quarter of New Orleans, or a part of the city. Yeah. It's just like the paranormal is such a big part. I mean, where there's like little occult stores and voodoo stores and things. It's like, that's not typical. No.
Well, it's, because the city is such a melting pot and always was, and hopefully always will be. It's just pretty fascinating. And then all those, above ground cemeteries, and there's just so much that feeds into it. But yeah, like you said, I can't think of another city in America outside of Salem and Savannah that is known for being a haunted location. Like, we're going to be there right around Halloween, and I am so curious to see how it feels.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
And I like this thing. It wasn't really like necessarily like the scariest part of the story, but just that feeling of when that situation where you wake up from a dream and then fall back asleep and then fall back into the same dream. That's such a surreal thing. It's happened to me, a fair amount of times over my life.
Same.
And it always, like, how does that work? Like, how does your waking mind and your unconscious or subconscious mind like connect, where you can like pick up where you left off. Essentially, it feels like that's what happens.
Yeah, that is how it feels for me too. And what's fascinating to me about that is like scientists still don't know why we dream.
Mm-hmm. They're so mysterious.
So it's like this very strange kind of space.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And just, for anybody going to New Orleans, like also venture outside of the quarter. There are so many other cool neighborhoods with awesome spooky tales and then just awesome food and bars and museums. And it doesn't stop at the quarter.
Yeah, totally. So many cool neighborhoods.
Yes. Go explore. Okay. Dan, do you have time for a very interesting Ouija board story?
I sure do.
Okay, let's go. First of all, thank you guys for doing what you do. A friend tipped me off to TimeSuck, which led me to Scared to Death and Bad Magic in general.
Yes.
You guys are amazing with your content and your community involvement, and I'm proud to call myself a fan of your work.
Thank you.
I know, so nice. Secondly, I'm definitely a creep. If I'm watching a movie by myself, it's horror. If I'm reading a book, it's horror. If I'm listening to a podcast, chances are it's yours because it's my favorite. But as much as I love horror and as much as I love listening to your show, deep down, I've never really thought of myself as a believer in the paranormal. I've always looked at it as entertainment only, not true tales of terror. Even when I've experienced weird shit myself, my mind is creepily efficient at rationalizing or just straight up dismissing it. Until recently. I should start with my mom. She's also a fan of anything spooky, and she had no reservations about introducing me to some of the most terrifying memories of my childhood. Letting me watch scary movies that gave me nightmares at 5 years old, telling me stories about the haunted houses she'd lived in, convincing me that there was a monster in Long Lake. I'm 45 and I'm still nervous about swimming in water I can't see the bottom of. As an adult, I can see that in most cases, she was just being drunkenly careless or she was giving herself a little laugh. But when she warned me about Ouija boards, she was dead serious. Her birthday is in late December, and this was the year she would turn 50. I was a senior in high school, and the whole family was together for a few days during Christmas break. Mom, Dad, my 2 older sisters, their husbands, their collective 6 kids, and myself all packed into a 4-bed, 1-bath house with a 5th-wheel camper out back. Chaos. Being the youngest of my siblings by 7 years, my oldest sister being 14 years older than me, I wasn't usually kept in the loop about everyone's personal stuff, but I could tell something was off with everyone. Mom was quieter than usual. My sisters hovered around her more than normal. On the night before her birthday, Mom and my sisters were having drinks and talking in the kitchen. Everyone else was asleep, so they were talking quietly. I'd been in my room reading a Stephen King book and had gotten thirsty. When I walked into the kitchen, their conversation died. The awkwardness of the silence while I rifled through the fridge was beyond obvious. I was feeling particularly adult at the moment and decided to face it head-on, sitting down at the table and boldly asking everyone what they weren't telling me. My sisters looked at my mom, and she looked at me for a long, uncomfortable moment before telling me a story. When she was young, her and 2 of her friends had sat down with the Ouija board. They had no goal in mind, nobody specific they wanted to contact. They were just looking for some fun. I mean, it was a Hasbro board game after all, wasn't it? They all asked some silly questions, blamed each other for moving the planchette, giggled a bunch, normal Ouija board stuff. But then someone asked the board one of those questions, the taboo ones. How old will we be when we die? The board answered them with just 3 numbers, 37, 46, and 49. Despite the young ages, the board had been correct about both of my mom's friends. One died at 37 in a car accident and the other at 46 from a heart attack. My mom had an hour left to find out if it was all just a coincidence or if she and her friends had actually contacted something with that Ouija board. The clock struck 12. The board was officially bullshit, and everybody had a couple of extra drinks. I even got to have one to celebrate a victory over something that was probably nothing in the first place. Now, I'm only telling you that story to let you know where my head was at when I had my first and only experience with a Ouija board. I was just out of college, sharing a house with 2 other people, one of which was a girl who I wanted to impress. So when they busted out a Ouija board and a bottle of tequila, I thought about that night at Mom's for a second. But then I dismissed it quickly and sat down with them to play. If you haven't used one before, the idea of a Ouija board may seem really dumb. Somebody's fucking moving the planchette, right? Duh. But when you've got your fingers lightly resting on the thing and it starts sliding around the board and it doesn't look like your friends are moving it, well, you can get kind of caught up. It didn't take long for the board to start talking. Yes, there was someone here with us. Yes, there was someone it wanted to talk to. Joshua. Well, that felt weird, and that was my first hint to get the fuck out. Why would it want to talk to me? I didn't have any recently deceased loved ones or anything. I asked who it was, and it took a minute, but it spelled out a name and I'll never forget it. Ryanhill. Ryan Hill? Who the fuck is that? It's such a specific but generic name, and it rang no bells with me. I couldn't imagine one of my roommates taking the time to spell something out as a prank and then not using a name I recognized. I asked where he knew me from, and the board spelled out SCHOOL. I checked my yearbook afterwards, no matches. Then I asked if he was dead, and instead of answering the question, the planchette moved to 5, then away, then to 4, then away. And then I'm getting even stronger, get the fuck outs. Then to 3, away. Then it landed on 2. And in my mind, as it landed on 2, I saw a face. A horrible face. Something like a kabuki mask with wild, matted hair, a mouth too wide and far too many teeth. And it was screaming towards me with horrific intent. And I let go of the planchette. My roommates looked disappointed. I said it seemed like a countdown. And they asked, a countdown to what? I couldn't tell them for sure, and I got a little embarrassed trying to explain the face I saw and my reaction to it. I did not want to keep going with the board, and they didn't want to do it without me. So, back in the box it went, and by the morning I had rationalized the whole episode as getting swept up in something that was probably nothing in the first place. I didn't think about that night for another 20 years. Now, I'm in my early 40s. I've got a wife, 3 daughters between the ages of 7 and 12. I've got a job, a mortgage, 5 acres with something like, 20 ducks and chickens that I'm trying to keep up with. I'm busy adulting, in other words. I don't spend any time worried about the paranormal. I still love it, though. I don't know which episode it was, but before you guys got rolling, you two plugged Graveyard Tales, another podcast about spooky stuff. I was intrigued, a wild and cool synonym for interested, so I gave them a shot. I was driving home from work and still in their early episodes, and they were talking about Ouija boards. They had obviously done more research about them than I had, and they started listing off the rules of the Ouija board. Never play alone. Always say goodbye when you're done. That kind of stuff. Then they mentioned one that put me in a weird headspace for a minute. A countdown of any kind is a sign of an entity trying to escape the board. This gave me a start and brought me straight back to that night with the board and that face. And I spent the rest of the drive home asking myself questions instead of listening. Why did they mention countdowns? That's so specific. I'd never heard anything about countdowns and Ouija boards before that, and I am a horror fan. Why would a referral from my favorite podcast almost immediately lead me to the only reference to countdowns on Ouija boards in my life, other than my own experience with it? Coincidence, my skeptic brain answered. You're not a Ouija board researcher or whatever. There are things you don't know, you jackass. Why would that face pop up in my mind, fully formed and detailed? It didn't remind me of anything. It wasn't familiar in any way. I felt like it was inserted into my mind, not extracted from my mind. Because you've been watching and reading scary shit your whole life, dummy. You've forgotten more horror than most people will ever even know. Your imagination is quick and served up a hell of a jump scare. And it went back and forth like that for the most of the drive home. By the time I got there and ate dinner, I had rationalized the whole episode as getting swept up in something that was probably nothing. I didn't think about it again for another month. Now, I can't stop thinking about it. 2 weeks ago, I was clearing off the kitchen table, which spent most of its time as an art studio, covered in Play-Doh sculptures, friendship bracelets, and drawings. That day, it was drawings in pencil, and I could tell it was my middle daughter's work. She was an exceptional artist for an adult, let alone a 10-year-old. She was in a mushroom phase and had been drawing many varieties of Alice in Wonderland-looking fungi. I gathered the sheets of printer paper scattered over the table and uncovered a drawing that had been buried underneath a handful of others. It was the face from the Ouija board. Not in perfect detail, mind you, but close enough that my heart skipped a beat. Close enough that I knew what it was. I was right back to that night again. quiet panic is the only way I can describe the feeling that came over me. All my insides, mental and physical, were rioting, but I had to keep a lid on it because I couldn't just freak out the rest of my family over something so odd. My wife would probably be concerned about me, not the kabuki demon in the drawing. I'm agonizing over all of this when my little daughter walks into the kitchen. She sees what I'm doing, beams, and asks me if I like the drawings. She'd been practicing shading. I tell her they're amazing, and I try to casually bring up the face she drew. My hand was actually shaking when I picked up the sheet to show her. I think I sounded calm. What's this one? I asked and held up the face. She saw it, and her smile fled her face. For a moment, she looked confused, and then maybe scared, and then angry. She marched over to me, grabbed the picture, crumpled it up into a ball, and threw it into the garbage. I threw that one away once already today. I don't like it, she said before hurrying out of the kitchen and going to her room. I can usually rationalize these things. I'm really good at coming up with explanations for unreasonable occurrences. But I'm having a hard time with this. That's too many coincidences, isn't it? I mean, it's probably just a random face my daughter drew that happened to look like the one screaming at me from the Ouija board, but what if it isn't? What if my friends and I had actually contacted something with that Ouija board? What if we unleashed it? What if that thing now is after my daughter? I don't know what to do. I don't know any mediums or ghost hunters or crystal warriors, and I don't think Sage is going to solve this, if it's anything in the first place. It's probably not. It's probably just coincidences. But what if it isn't? Mr. Joshua.
Yeek.
This story bothers me so goddamn much.
Yeah, that's a really creepy one.
don't
really,
fucking-
like one of the creepiest ones I've heard here in a while.
It's just, I don't know if it's the relatability.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that it like keeps coming back. I don't know if it's the specificity of Ryan Hill and this face and then his daughter drawing that. Like, is it all of it combined? I don't know. It's too much. It's too much. I don't like it.
Yeah, it's the combination of the face and the daughter's drawing. Plus, like I had also never heard of the countdown thing. That's the first I've ever heard of that.
I know now.
I don't know where that comes from.
Now I feel like I need to like go listen to that podcast. Blah blah blah.
Do some like look it up on the internet maybe.
I say that, but I'm not going to because I actually don't want to know.
Yeah,
There's like always a certain part of me that from your stories or my stories, when I learn something new, I think like, yeah, I'm going to go research that. And then when we walk out of the studio, I think absolutely fucking not. I don't need more of this in my brain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would be, God. And it's interesting that he found that out after it already happened. Because I've also never heard a Ouija board story with a countdown. Not that I can recall.
Oh, yeah.
Like random numbers and stuff, sure. Like, thing flying across the board, spelling out creepy things.
Yeah.
Moving erratically, like all kinds of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But never a 5, 4, 3, 2. And then they just took their hands off the planchette.
I think problematically, and he doesn't say this, but I hope that everyone caught it, is that not only was there a countdown.
Yeah, you're not supposed to say goodbye, right?
Yeah, exactly. They didn't close the session.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if there would be a different outcome currently if he would have put his fingers back on the planchette, if they would have closed out the session, or I just don't know. I actually don't know how that works either. Like if you're in the middle of using a spirit board and then somebody removes their fingers from the planchette and then they're like, oh, sorry, and then put their fingers back on and close it. Like, is it too late?
Mm-hmm.
Is whatever, if there was something trying to get out, is it already out? And then when you put your fingers back on the planchette and close out the session, does that then mean okay, cool, you closed it, but you kind of missed the boat here?
Right. Yeah, I don't know.
Like once the circle is broken.
Mm-hmm. Such a weird thing with Ouija boards. I go so back and forth because, like he was talking about Hasbro or Parker Brothers, whoever makes them, Parker Brothers.
I think it's Hasbro.
Is it Hasbro?
Or did you think it was Milton Bradley?
Might have been Milton Bradley. Yeah. But whoever makes it, it's like there is that part of my brain where it's like, this is a mass-produced children's game. Like literally is a mass-produced children's game.
Uh-huh.
So I'm like, how could it's like being scared of Monopoly or being worried that Battleship is going to sink a real ship somehow.
Oh my God, what a funny horror story. Not funny,
Yeah.
but what a...
Like you're playing a game and there's some place in the world you're actually affecting as you play the game.
We find out that Monopoly is actually why we're having a housing crisis right now.
It's connected to the game. Yeah, so there's part of me that just thinks like, get out of here, it's just a game. But then you hear stories like that and you're like, ugh.
I know.
And it could
I've had my own like experiences. That is why like when people write in, they're like, oh, I know, Lynze, you'll never do it. Yeah, because I've done it and I've had really creepy experiences. Why do I need to do that again?
And if this is, like these things have power, I'm sure it's not about the board. It's just like it's a vessel for your intentions that you're putting behind the board. And
yeah, I think that's why you can have like, a store-bought one or you can
make one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Also, can we just like take it one step back and how his mom and her 3 friends playing the Ouija board.
Oh, and the 2 ages
37,
were correct?
46, 49. You better fucking believe I'm holding my breath on my birthday. Like no shit.
The countdown. Oh yeah, and the last thing I wanted to say about the mom cracked me up where he referenced or she, I guess. Trying to remember like gender.
Mr. Joshua?
Oh yeah, Mr. Joshua. 7 years from the nearest sibling or nearest sister. That's why I got confused.
And then 14 years to the oldest sister.
14 years to the oldest. So like that gap. It just made me think about like when he talked about like his mom letting him watch horror movies at the age of 5, saying all these creepy things. I just like that visual of the mom, like by the time the mom gets to the final kid, which might have been a whoopsie, just being like, whatever.
I'm
gonna have fun with this one. I'm gonna maybe to drink a little bit too much in moments and let him watch horror movies when he shouldn't be, and whatever, he'll be fine.
Yeah, it made me think of my mom. She's the youngest of 4, definitely a whoopsie, and like the next sister is it's like my mom. It's like 12 years between my mom and her next sister, not even the oldest sister, just the next sister.
That's a lot.
It's a big freaking gap. Yeah, my mom was like in grade school and like her sisters are getting married and having babies.
When she's playing with dolls.
She's like, what? What's happening? What's a marriage?
Like having a bunch of aunts instead of like sisters.
Totally. Yeah, very much so like that for her growing up. Oh yeah, good luck with that one. It has been lingering in my brain for a while.
Thanks, Mr. Joshua.
Thank you, Joshua. Okay. Would you like to do some Annabelle shout-outs?
I would. I can start.
Okay, go for it.
I would like to thank the following Annabelles for supporting us on Patreon. Thank you so much. Catalyst Comet, Raya and Kale, Emily Slaughter. Emily Slaughter could be like a horror author name.
Fuck yeah. If you're not a horror author, stop everything and go for it.
Breckenridge Case, Ethan Ford, DCEW, Leanna Lewis, John Henley, One Demented, take me a second, so I'll compress together. One Demented Fucker, 39. And Juliana Welch.
Nice. I would also like to thank the following Annabelles for your ongoing and continued patronage for what we do here. It is so appreciated and keeps the lights on. Austin Kilbrew, Destiny Powell, Petty Creeper. Nice. Faith Ellen, Jay Redbase, Crystal Gambino, Alan Grimes, Chloe Bell, Adele Torres, and Regine Fowl.
Thank you.
Fowl, yeah.
And was the first Annabelle you listed? Was it the last name Killeber or Brew? Killebrew?
Killebrew, yeah. Killebrew?
I think it's Killebrew only because there's a really famous baseball player from a long time ago named Harmon Killebrew.
Oh, so I dropped the E. Got it.
Yeah. He was a big home run hitter.
Well, this is his son. Big fans. Okay, and then I have my spoopy shout outs to Josue from Bon Bon. Happy 5th anniversary. Thanks for being the best dad and husband we could ask for. To Damien, the greatest man I know from Laura, your spooky girlfriend. Happy anniversary and thanks for listening to all the spooky stories I enjoy. Here's to many more. To Grace and Aaron from Kai, thank you for being the most kick-ass mom and sister ever. I love you both with my whole heart. To Isabel from Lloyd, guess what? Chicken butt. And then this, now I have never done this before. This shout out, I just am so blown away by the tenacity of this person that I have to read this very brief email to you guys.
Okay.
The shout out is from Haley to Haley. She just wanted to give herself a shout out, but this is why. I just want to give myself a shout out for getting back to college. I'm now 26, but back when I was 20, I was nearly burned alive from a grease fire and had to drop out. 70% of my body had 3rd-degree burns, and it all happened after a family member accidentally threw a huge pot of grease that caught fire onto me when they were throwing it outside and didn't see me standing there dialing 911 with my back turned to them. Doctors don't know how I survived because the grease literally cooked my body. It burned so deep, I have massive scars all over me, which doesn't play well with my body image and mental health. and I have nerve damage. I also was supposed to have my left hand amputated because of how severe the burn was, but miraculously, it was the first thing that recovered compared to the rest of my body. I thank God every day I'm still here. I never went back to school because of depression and thinking, what's the point? I was fine working these little jobs to get by in life. But after listening to Time Suck and Scared to Death for a couple of years now and hearing all the great stories about other people accomplishing greater things after horrible tragedies, it made me realize it's not the end of the world. Only I can make this life a great one. So I'm getting myself up off the ground and enrolled myself into college so I can get my master's in business. So thanks, you guys, for what y'all do. You mean the world to me. Love you both. Bye.
Wow.
Okay, I didn't read that for like the accolades at the end and I should have like cut them out for us, but like, holy fucking shit, Haley.
Yeah, that's amazing. Congratulations,
you badass.
Haley. Yeah, truly. Good
Like,
for you.
When I read that the first time I cried and I'm crying now, I mean, it is so inspiring. And I think sometimes we all just need a little reminder that like you can do very hard things.
And just like Haley was inspired by other people, now Haley is going to inspire people herself.
I know. It's such a beautiful cycle.
Just going to keep on going forward.
Yes. And we're sorry that you went through that, Haley, but so proud of you. So proud of you.
Wow.
And that's it.
And that's it. And that's our show. Wow. Thanks for continuing to send in your personal tales of terror to mystory@scaredtodeathpodcast.com. You can email us for everything else, info@scaredtodeathpodcast.com. Thanks to Logan Keith scoring today's show. Thanks to Heather Rylander organizing the My Story emails. Thanks to book editor Drew Atana polishing and preparing listener stories for book number 6.
Crazy. This is the first one of book 6.
Yeah. Thank you to Molly Box finding the first story I shared this week, and to Kyler Cummins on his road trip finding the second.
Nice.
We're on YouTube. If you can still find us on YouTube if you want to listen to the show, where we will have pictures now.
Yes.
And we're on Facebook and Instagram, where we post pics that accompany episodes and more at Scared to Death Podcast. We have a private Facebook group, Creeps and Peepers, full of fellow horror lovers. Big thanks to the All Seeing Eyes, Creeps and Peepers moderators. Thanks for making our community such a fun and welcoming place for so many online. And enjoy your nightmares, Creeps and Peepers. Hope you were scared to death.
Bye.
If spirits threaten me in this place, fight water by water and fire by fire. Banish their souls into nothingness and remove their powers until the last trace. Let these evil beings flee through time and space. Evil may pass through, but hath no home here within, scared to death.
Bad Magic Productions.
Actually, you should be worried about what's in the shed.
True.
You don't know what I'm doing out there.